If you love old school rock and roll with great vocals and great guitar solos and a fresh dose of the blues,
nobody leave this place without singing the blues.
You're gonna love the new record from Slash called Orgy of the Damned. It's an orgy of rock and roll goodness. Let's break it all down on this edition of Rock Album Review. Hey everybody, it's Nick here with you. Welcome back to the channel. Orgy of the Damned is the second solo studio album, 6th overall from Slash, who for the last several years has been kicking ass with Myles Kennedy and the Conspirators. As well as this work back with Guns N' Roses, just like everybody else, I'm surprised that that's still continued to work with Guns N' Roses back together. It's been a few years now. I actually saw Guns N' Roses live back in 2017, and Slash was by far the best part of that show. However, for this record, Slash has sidelined the Conspirators and is just doing a straight solo record with special guests on vocals, kind of like he did back in 2010 with his first solo album, where it was just kind of him with a lot of different guest vocalists, including Myles Kennedy, who of course they went on to work on a lot of music together. And just like his Slash Blues Ball project that he did in the mid-1990s after he left Guns N' Roses, this one has a crazy awesome lineup of vocalists and guests on here, from Chris Robinson from the Black Crowes, Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top, Paul Rodgers of Free and Bad Company, and then you have solo singers like Gary Clark Jr., you got Iggy Pop, Dorothy, and even Demi Lovato on here. So is this new album from Slash, Orgy of the Damned, worth a listen? For my money, the answer is yes, especially if you love old school rock and roll and blues and soul. I definitely do. There's no extra frills or craziness on here. It's just great, straight ahead rock and roll music with great vocals and obviously some pretty awesome guitar solos. But I have to admit, it does get a little bit long in the tooth. This album clocks in at 1 hour and 9 minutes, which is a little bit of a lengthy listen. There are a lot of guitar solos on here. There are a lot of extended jams. So I think your enjoyment of this record might vary on how much mileage you get out of the blues.
Nobody leave this place without singing the blues.
Yeah. We know. But overall, I love the sound of what they're doing here. It's very much live off the floor, and it reminds me basically of going to see Slash live in concert. If he was going to have a bunch of different guest vocalists, it very much feels like a live off the floor live concert kind of thing. And I thought the lineup of guest vocalists who appeared on this album is pretty damn solid. There are some names that I'm not so familiar with, but then obviously some of the biggest names in rock and roll appear on this record. So you can't really argue with any of these picks. It kicks off with the song The Pusher featuring Chris Robinson of the Black Crowes, one of my favorite vocalists in rock and roll. I think one of the best vocalists of all time. I did a rock albums ranked for the Black Crowes here on the channel and a review of their new album. Big Black Crowes fan over here. So when you put Chris Robinson together with Slash, it's going to be awesome. This is a great song to kick off this record. The Steppenwolf classic, that's the version that I'm most familiar with. Anytime you get Chris Robinson on vocals, it's going to be great. And right off the bat with this song, we are treated to an extended 7-minute jam. So for better or for worse, you know what you're in for, and that's a theme that continues for the rest of the record. Then we get to Crossroads featuring Gary Clark Jr., who I think is one of the best. Well, he's not really up and coming anymore, but one of the best of the younger generation of blues players that are out there right now. You can't really do a blues cover album without playing Crossroads. It's one of those essential blues songs that you have to play, and I feel like Gary Clark Jr. is very much a modern steward of the blues. He's carrying the blues, carrying that torch into the future, and I think he was a great pick for doing this. And then you have him, who's Gary Clark Jr. is another great lead guitar player, so you have him trading off solos with Slash. So every time that I was thinking of this song, I was picturing myself in a sweaty, smoky blues bar listening to a band just playing off solos and just kicking ass, and that's definitely the vibe that I got on Crossroads. Then we get to Hoochie Coochie Man featuring Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top doing the Willie Dixon and Muddy Waters classic. I think that Billy Gibbons' low southern drawl is really fit for doing a Muddy Waters track, because Muddy definitely had that kind of voice as well. ZZ Top are among the best blues bands ever as well, so it makes sense that he would appear on this record. And he's also another guitar legend, so you have some vocalists who are on here just doing some singing along with Slash, and then you have people like Gary Clark Jr. and Billy Gibbons, who are great lead guitar players in their own right, just trading off guitar licks with Slash, and I think that's one of the most enjoyable parts of this record. And then we get to a song called Awful Dream with Iggy Iggy Pop, another rock and roll legend on here. This one was a low and slow acoustic blues kind of track. Iggy Pop, even though he's considered to be more of the punk genre, he's definitely got the right voice for doing the blues as well. And the thing with the blues is that it influences everything that came after it. It's not just rock and roll music, because then rock and roll music influenced punk, and then punk influenced a whole host of other genres after that. So it really does go back to the blues, even if you're somebody like Iggy Pop, who's more of a punk singer. The only thing, I think this song was a little bit boring for me at times. Didn't really enjoy this one as much as the other ones. As much as Iggy Pop is an icon and one of the best who's ever do it, it's kind of boring. Even though I don't want to say the blues is boring, this song didn't really jump out to me as much. Then we get to Born Under a Bad Sign, another blues classic featuring Paul Rodgers of Free and Bad Company, one of the best voices in classic rock. I love the riff on this one. I'm most familiar with the Cream version of Born Under a Bad Sign, so that was kind of my reference point for listening to this version. No blues cover album would be complete without this song. Even though I love the blues, it does get very formulaic. It's kind of baked into the DNA of the blues, that it follows a certain pattern. You have the 12-bar blues. This one was a little bit formulaic, because you go into the verse, you do the chorus, you do a solo, you do a verse, a chorus, and solo, and so forth. It can be a little bit boring at times, but otherwise, it's awesome. One of my favorite tracks on this record was Killing Floor with Brian Johnson from AC/DC. And I think one of the reasons this really jumped out to me when I was listening to it is because Brian Johnson is really singing in a much lower register. He's not doing his high squeal that he does with AC/DC. He's using a little bit of a low croon. And I was actually reading about this record, and that Slash picked this song, Killing Floor in particular, for Brian Johnson to sing, because he really wanted to showcase Brian Johnson's lower register. And he really does that on this track. I was really taken aback by the sound of Brian Johnson's voice, because it doesn't sound like anything he does with AC/DC, and I think that's awesome as well. I think the song has some great harmonica on it, and I think that Killing Floor with Brian Johnson, definitely one of the strongest tracks on Orgy of the Damned. And then one of the more controversial tracks on this record, featuring a guest vocalist that I don't think most people would associate with Slash, would be Papa Was a Rolling Stone with Demi Lovato. I don't think she's a singer that most rock purists, blues purists would want to appear on a Slash solo record. She does okay. She does an admirable job. She can obviously hit the notes on this song. She's a really, really capable and strong vocalist. I just felt like her delivery overall was pretty soulless. There was a couple lines on there where I was cringing a little bit at just the lack of soul going into it, especially when you're going to sing a classic Temptation song. So she does an admirable job. I do think she has a good voice, but maybe she just doesn't really fit the rock and roll mold as much as people would want her to on this record. But I'm a huge soul music fan. I love Motown. I love the Temptations. I love this song. The main riff on here is silky smooth, but overall, maybe not the strongest track on the record. I know they just released a video for it. I think Demi Lovato does a great job, or a decent job overall, but maybe isn't quite the right fit for this album. And then there were some tracks with some other vocalists that I'm not as familiar with as some of the other names on this record. Oh Well, featuring Chris Stapleton. I have heard of some of his stuff. This one had a little bit more of a country vibe to it. Even Slash can go country. I thought this song had a nice bounce to it, had a really killer solo by Slash, as expected. And even though I don't know much about Chris Stapleton, I don't know much of his own music, I think that he's a really solid guest to have on this album, and he gives a little bit of that country vibe to it, which is a nice way to diversify the track list. Key to the Highway, a song that I'm familiar with because the band did a version of it back in the day, featuring Dorothy. I'm not very familiar with Dorothy. I've seen them and seen her on television a couple of times on the television with her music video. I know, watching a music video on television. What year is this? This one's kind of straight ahead blues. Dorothy can hit the high notes, but I'm just not a huge fan of her voice in general. Kind of grated on me a little bit, but she was a decent pick to include on this album. I really enjoyed the Stevie Wonder cover, Living for the City, featuring Tash Neal. I'm not very familiar with his work, but it looks like he's part of the same younger generation of blues players like Gary Clark Jr. I thought he had a great voice on this track. If you can pull off Stevie Wonder, you know that you're a great vocalist. This is not a Stevie Wonder song that I'm super familiar with, but like I said, I'm a huge Motown and soul fan, and I found Living for the City with Tash Neal to be one of the more enjoyable tracks on the record. Then we get to a song called Stormy Monday featuring Beth Hart, which is not a name that I'm super familiar with, but looking online, she's been around for quite a while now, has put out a lot of music. She has a great voice. This one's more that steamy, smoky, slow cooking blues, which is really, really cool. Really great way to end off this album on a little bit more of a steamy note. Stormy Monday, every day of the week is bad. You know what, Beth? I can relate. And I can feel the musical chemistry between Slash and Beth on this song. It sounds like they're really, really playing off each other really, really well. It was a nice way to end off the album. And there's a little bit of a change in tone, a little bit of change in key. I don't know really the key on there, but there's a change from the more minor sounding blues to more of a major sounding blues as they got towards the end of the song. And I felt that that was a really, really strong way to end the record. And then the album finishes off with a guitar instrumental called Metal Chestnut, which was cool. Great way to showcase Slash towards the end of the album. This is obviously a very guitar heavy album. Great way to showcase him as we got towards the end of the album. I just didn't really know where it fit in overall with the vibe and the theme of this record. You have an entire record that is filled with these blues and soul and rock and roll standards, and then you finish it off with this instrumental track. Didn't really see how that fit into the rest of the theme of Orgy of the Damned, but if you love Slash, you love great guitar licks, then this song is for you. Overall, I think Orgy of the Damned is a solid listen from front to back. I love the blues. I love soul music. It really is the building blocks of all the music that we know and love today. We would be nowhere without the blues, without soul music, without early rock and roll, and this album really is a tribute to that. It's not reinventing anything. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's just they're playing music that has stood the test of time for many, many years, and you have Slash rocking it out on the guitar with some of the best vocalists ever. That said, there's only so much you can do with the blues, with the 12-bar blues, with guitar solos like that. I've played the blues a lot in my time in bands as well, and it's an amazing genre. Like I said, the building blocks of all the music that we know and love today. But in 2024, maybe it doesn't sound as modern as it should or as we want it to, but really, does it have to? I'm not so sure. And just like the best blues jams, this album can be a little bit long-winded, a little bit long in the tooth, clocking in at 1 hour and 9 minutes. So if you're going to be listening to it, maybe just settle in with a beer or a joint and just enjoy. There's really only so much you can listen to in a blues jam. You pretty much just get the gist of it by the middle of this record. Although I did really dig the soul influence on here as well, because I love the blues, but I love 60s soul music a lot more. So I love Stevie Wonder on here, having that cover on here, having the Papa Was a Rolling Stone cover on here. Even though it was with Demi Lovato, she did an okay job. But it's nice to have that influence on here as well. So I love that mix of blues, soul, and rock and roll. 3 of the best genres of music ever. They never get old, and I don't think they ever will. Overall, I'm going to give the new album from Slash, Orgy of the Damned, a 3 out of 5. And that is it, guys. That is my review for the new Slash album, Orgy of the Damned. Let me know what you thought of the album in the comments below. Make sure to like this video if you like this review. If you like this channel and you like what I'm doing here, make sure to smash that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos. You can follow me on social media across all platforms, Instagram, TikTok, X, everywhere at Nick Cheeto Music, and you can check out my band online at foolsunion.com. But I'll see you guys again for another rock album review here on the channel. Until then, rock on, everybody.